Out here, justice was rarely blind, and mercy never came easy. When Mira staggered into Ward's land carrying two hungry children and nothing but ghosts in her eyes, he could have turned her away. Should have, maybe. But something in her defiance, in the way she held her head despite the bruises, in the way she guarded her babies like a mother wolf, made turning away impossible. He took them in. He gave them shelter. And when the past came riding, guns drawn and cruel, he stood between her and the storm. What came after? Well, that was where the real story began. Because survival is just the start. What do you do after the shooting stops and love dares to root itself in the ashes? The wind came cruel that night, not whispering, not moaning, roaring. Snow fell sideways, sharp as splinters, biting at Mira LeClaire's cheeks as she stumbled forward, clutching her sons tight against her sides. Jesse, just past 10, walked on her right, jaw tight, his small hands red and raw, where they gripped the strap of their satchel. Sam, barely 7, whimpered softly on her left, too cold to cry proper anymore. His steps dragged. He wouldn't make it much longer. Mira knew this. She'd known it when the sky darkened hours ago, and when their horse collapsed from exhaustion long before sundown. But turning back wasn't an option. Back meant the place they fled. The homestead, where gunfire had torn the night apart. Back meant blood pooling across the floor where her husband, Emmett, fell protecting them from raiders with snake brands burned into their necks. There was only forward, even if forward felt like walking off the edge of the earth. Sam faltered again. Mira stopped, pulling him close, feeling his tiny heartbeat struggling under layers of wet wool. "Stay with me, baby," she whispered, voice cracked raw from wind and grief. Jesse said nothing, but his jaw clenched harder. He'd stopped crying hours ago. Too old for tears now, too young for this kind of hardness. Mira pressed her forehead to Sam's briefly, then forced her legs to move. And then, a light, small, flickering, golden, not imagined. Real. It bled through the snow like hope wrapped in flame. She nearly collapsed from the relief of it. A cabin, half sunken into the hillside like it grew there. Smoke from the chimney fought against the storm, curling defiant and blue. She knocked, her knuckles weak against the thick wood. No answer. She knocked again, desperate now. Finally, footsteps. The door cracked open. A man stood in the gap, shadowed and still. His beard was thick, eyes sharper than the blade he wore on his hip. He looked at her like a man who had stopped expecting visitors a long time ago. Before Mira could speak, Jesse stepped forward, voice breaking. "Please, mister, my little brother, he's freezing." The man said nothing, but Mira watched his eyes shift to Sam, saw them soften just enough. The door opened wider. "Get in, quick," he said, rough as gravel. They stumbled inside, the warmth like a fist to the gut after so much cold. Mira sagged against the wall as Sam clung to her legs. Jesse stood awkward and stiff, eyes darting to the stranger. He didn't offer his name, didn't ask for theirs. He simply tossed thick blankets from a nearby bench, stoked the fire until it roared, and filled a kettle with snow to melt. The man moved like a ghost with purpose, not cruel, but guarded, every step measured, every glance heavy. Mira forced herself upright. "Thank you," she murmured. "Didn't do it for you," he said flat. Boy looked near dead. Still, he brought them broth, thin, salty, but warm. Mira fed Sam first, hands shaking so bad she nearly spilled. Jesse ate slowly, suspicious eyes never leaving the man. Mira finally sat back, feeling the last of her strength bleed into the floorboards. Her voice came low. "I'm Mira LeClaire," she said, out of politeness more than hope. "These are my boys. Jesse." "Sam." The man didn't smile. He simply nodded once, like recording the names in his head. "Ward Callahan," he said eventually. Silence filled the room again. Outside, the wind howled and slammed against the shutters like angry hands. Mira noticed, as the boys fell asleep, curled together on the rug, that Ward hadn't asked a single question. Not where they came from, not what had driven them into the storm. He didn't need to. Men like him knew when darkness followed strangers to their door. Before Mira could thank him again, her eyes drifted shut. Exhaustion claimed her like a soft and terrible mercy. In the early gray hours of dawn, Mira woke to the smell of coffee and something frying. Ward stood by the stove, sleeves rolled, eyes set hard on the window as if expecting ghosts to ride up the ridge at any second. Jesse stirred beside her, rubbing his eyes. Sam snored softly, his small face relaxed for the first time in days. Mira sat up slowly. "You don't trust us," she said quietly. Ward didn't turn. "Don't trust anybody, but I won't turn out a mother and her boys into a blizzard either. That makes me cautious, not cruel." She nodded, accepting the truth of it. After a moment, Ward looked over his shoulder, his face unreadable. "Storm's breaking, but if something's chasing you, you need to decide. Stay and bring it here, or move on and leave it behind." Mira met his eyes without flinching. "It'll find us either way," she said softly. "Might as well face it with a roof over our heads." Ward studied her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he poured her a cup of coffee. An unspoken agreement passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but something like survival. Shared and stubborn. By the time the sun had dragged itself free of the clouds, the snow had settled into heavy, wet heaps. It clung to the hills and hung low on the branches outside Ward Callahan's cabin, softening the world into silence. Inside, it was anything but. Jesse and Sam had woken hungry, restless, and full of questions they didn't dare speak aloud. Ward was already up and moving before the boys even stirred. He moved through the small space like a man who didn't waste time thinking. The fire roared in the hearth, a pot of beans bubbled quietly, and fresh logs were stacked by the door. Mira watched from the edge of the blanket she and the boys shared. Her back still ached from sleeping on the hard floor, but her mind raced harder. Ward wasn't cruel. That much she knew now. But he wasn't kind either. Kind men asked questions. Kind men smiled. Ward did neither. He simply worked. When he finally noticed her watching, he didn't blink. "Food's ready," he said. "Not an invitation, just a fact." Mira roused the boys. Jesse helped his younger brother with stiff fingers. They moved like children who had learned to stay quiet in a world too loud. At the table, Ward didn't sit right away. He waited, arms crossed, eyes watching as they ate. Not hostile, not curious, just watchful. It wasn't until Sam, his mouth full of beans, let out a tiny laugh at something Jesse muttered that Ward's expression shifted. Just slightly. The edge softened, his jaw relaxing. "You teach them manners, or are they wild like most?" he asked Mira, voice low but edged with something close to humor. Mira met his gaze carefully. "They know better than to take what isn't theirs," she said evenly. "And they know to thank a man who gives them food and shelter." Ward only nodded. He didn't need flowery gratitude. After breakfast, Mira helped clear the table without asking. Ward didn't stop her. She wiped each dish with care, hands shaking less than the night before. Outside, the wind had calmed. Only soft flakes drifted down now, lazy and harmless. Ward pulled on his coat and gloves, glancing at Mira as he loaded his rifle. "Got fence to check. Won't be long." She stood quickly, instinct pulling at her. "I can help." He raised a brow. "You've got young'uns to mind, and you look like a strong breeze might still knock you over." "I'm not fragile," she shot back, sharper than she intended. For the first time, Ward actually smiled. Barely, but it was there. "Didn't say you were, Mira LeClaire. Just said you're tired." And just like that, her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to men speaking plain without cutting words. Ward left without another word, Duke's hooves crunching softly as he rode out into the white. The cabin felt quieter without him. Jesse took up whittling a bit of soft pine he'd found near the hearth. Sam curled near the fire, humming tunelessly as he wrapped himself in the worn quilt. Mira busied herself. She swept, cleaned, and reorganized shelves. There wasn't much, but doing gave her mind something to hold on to. When Ward returned near dusk, his coat dusted white, Mira had stew simmering and cornbread baked. He stomped snow from his boots, hanging his coat by the door. "Smells better than bean," he remarked, surprising her. She handed him a bowl without asking. He ate quietly, nodding once in approval. The boys grew bolder after that. Jesse asked about Duke, and Ward, without much prompting, explained how he'd raised the gelding from a colt. Sam asked if there were bears nearby, which earned a rare chuckle from Ward. Not unless you count old man Harlan 2 valleys over. He don't like visitors either. Laughter, small, hesitant, filled the space. It sounded foreign in the cabin. Foreign, but good. That night, Mira sat across from Ward as the boys drifted off near the fire. She sipped tea she found in his cupboard, hands wrapped tight around the mug. "You don't talk much," she said softly, breaking the quiet. "Talk's overrated," he replied, leaning back in his chair, eyes half-lidded. "Sometimes," she agreed, "but sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and the dark." Ward's eyes opened fully at that. He studied her. Mira didn't flinch. "You ran from something bad," he said plainly. "Bad enough to walk into a storm with 2 boys and no horse." Her throat tightened, but she nodded. "Yes." He didn't push, didn't ask who or what. After a moment, she added, "They killed my husband. Burned what was ours. Came after us, too." Ward's jaw clenched. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't offer platitudes. He only said, "If they're hunting you, they'll find you eventually." Mira's hands shook. Not from fear, from exhaustion, from truth. "I know," she whispered. Ward leaned forward slightly, the firelight carving harsh lines across his face. "Then I reckon you'd better stay until you're ready to face them." It wasn't an offer. It wasn't kindness. It was the only answer a man like Ward Callahan knew how to give. Mira didn't smile, but something eased in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. Ward only nodded, eyes drifting back to the fire. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Mira slept that night without dreaming of running. The days that followed folded in on themselves, soft and strange as freshly laundered sheets. Ward Callahan's cabin, once silent as a grave, now hummed gently. Not loud, not wild, just quiet, steady life. Mira found herself moving differently. Each morning she rose early, before even Ward. She swept ashes from the hearth, folded the boys' bedrolls, and boiled water for coffee. Jesse, sensing the shift, helped without being asked. He chopped kindling, carried water, and even brushed Duke in the mornings. Sam, still young enough to cling but old enough to sense change, followed Ward like a shadow. Wherever the man went, fixing the fence, chopping wood, checking snares, Sam trailed behind, peppering him with soft-spoken questions. Ward didn't shoo him off. He didn't soften either. But Mira noticed something. When Sam asked what kind of tree was best for carving, Ward answered. When Jesse struggled to split thick rounds of oak, Ward stepped in and showed him how to hold the axe without losing fingers. He wasn't trying to be kind. He was just showing, teaching. Mira watched, half smiling, half aching. She hadn't thought much about what a man's presence could be after Emmett's death. Emmett had been loud, rough, always running toward something. Ward was still, heavy like stone, but in a way that steadied the world rather than weighed it down. A week after they arrived, Mira ventured to ask something bold. Supper had been quiet that night. Beans, cornbread, and early greens Mira had foraged from the thawing earth. Sam had already dozed off beside the hearth, and Jesse had gone outside to check on Duke. It was just the 2 of them, Mira and Ward, sharing a small table meant for one. She set down her fork and cleared her throat. "Do you want us gone?" Ward didn't look surprised by the question. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and leaned back in his chair. "No." The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. "Not because you pity us?" she asked, cautious. Ward shook his head. "I've buried enough pity. I'm too old and too tired to carry more." He paused, eyes steady on hers. "You and the boys. You fit here. That's all." Mira stared at him, unsure how to reply to something so simple and yet so profound. In the end, she only nodded and whispered, "Thank you." By late March, the land had softened so much that the first signs of spring boldly claimed the valley. Wildflowers peeped between patches of stubborn snow. The creek thawed and sang again, weaving its music through every corner of the woods. It was during those early thawing days that Ward began to change too. He laughed once, when Sam slipped and fell face first into a mud puddle while chasing Duke's tail. Not a cruel laugh, a real one, full and deep. Later, when Jesse asked if he could learn to shoot, Ward didn't hesitate. He brought out his second rifle, smaller and lighter. He didn't treat Jesse like a child. He taught him how to load, how to aim, and most importantly, when not to shoot. Mira sat on the porch and watched it all unfold. She wasn't foolish. She knew what was happening. The boys were beginning to look at Ward like something more than a stranger, something closer to family. And that terrified her, because family, she knew, could be lost in a blink. That evening, while Ward sat sharpening his knives and Jesse and Sam played knucklebones in front of the fire, Mira finally asked him the question that burned in her throat. "Why are you alone?" Ward stopped sharpening. The room stilled. He didn't answer right away. Finally, in a low voice, he spoke. "Had a wife once. Clara." Mira's heart tugged. "What happened?" Ward's jaw tightened. His eyes drifted to the flickering fire. "Sickness," he said simply. "Winter took her fast." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful, heavy but honest. Mira didn't press. She knew better than most that old wounds didn't need fingers poking in them. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Ward gave her a nod. Not acceptance, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. "You lost too," he added. Mira looked down at her hands. "Yes." Neither spoke again that night, but something shifted quietly between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people who had both stood at graves and kept on breathing. Spring deepened. Days grew longer, nights gentler. Mira and Ward worked side by side, planting rows of potatoes, fixing a hole in the roof, even stringing up fishing lines along the creek. T laughed more now. Sam raced Duke in the fields. And Mira found herself humming again, not loud but soft. Enough that Ward sometimes paused, listening without looking, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. They didn't speak of the past often anymore, but they didn't hide from it either. That was the truest kind of healing Mira had ever known. Not forgetting, but surviving beside someone who didn't ask you to forget in the first place. One night, as they watched the stars spill across the sky from the porch, Mira whispered the words she never thought she'd say aloud again. "This feels like home." Ward didn't respond right away, but then his hand brushed hers, fingers curling softly, almost shyly. "It can be," he said, and in that small, fragile moment, it already was. It started with smoke. Thin, distant, harmless at first. Ward spotted it early one morning while checking the traps near the creek. The column rose far past the southern ridge, swirling against the pale sky like a lazy snake. He stood still for a long moment, watching. By the time he returned to the cabin, the usual quiet hum of morning chores was underway. Mira was stringing dried herbs, Tava feeding the hens, Sam chopping kindling. Eli walked past them all without a word and set his rifle on the table. Mira's hand stilled midair. She didn't need to ask. She knew. She followed him outside, her apron still dusted with flour. "Smoke?" she asked softly. "Campfire. Too big for hunters," Ward replied, eyes on the hills. "Too early in the season for cattle drivers." Mira's throat tightened. She glanced back at the cabin, at her children, at the fragile world they'd built on bruised trust and small joys. "Is it them?" Ward didn't answer, but his silence was all she needed. They spent the day preparing. Ward checked the traps, reinforced the doors, and cut new shooting lanes between the trees that lined the clearing. Mira moved with sharp efficiency. She packed a satchel with jerky, a water skin, extra diapers for Hope, and matches. She showed Jesse and Tava where to hide if things went bad, deep beneath the floorboards, a hatch covered by an old bear rug. "You stay there until you hear my voice," she instructed them, voice firm. "Not Ward's, not anyone else's. Mine." The children didn't argue. Even Sam, always quick to ask why, simply nodded. That evening, they ate quietly. No one asked for seconds. No one lingered over supper. When darkness fell, Ward stayed outside on the porch, cleaning his rifle under the faint glow of the moon. Mira joined him, wrapped in a shawl, the baby already asleep against her chest. "How many do you think?" she asked. Ward didn't look away from his rifle. "Doesn't matter," he said. "I'll make the first shot count. After that, we'll see." Mira swallowed. "They won't stop." "No," Ward agreed, "but neither will I." For a long time they sat in silence, the night heavy with what could not be said. Finally, Mira whispered, "I don't want to run anymore." Ward turned to her, eyes dark and steady. "Then we stand." She met his gaze, nodding slowly. Something fierce stirred in her. Fear, yes, but layered beneath was something else. Resolve. If the storm was coming, she would not meet it cowering. They arrived with dawn. 5 riders, shapes black against the bleeding sky. Ward spotted them first, leaning casually in their saddles as they crested the ridge. They came slow, like men certain of victory. Mira stood beside him on the porch, Taiva gripping her skirt tightly. "Inside," Ward said low. Mira hesitated just a second, then ushered the children into the cabin. She closed the door but left it unlatched, rifle resting against the wall nearby. Ward stepped off the porch, calm as always. The lead rider broke ahead, rough-faced, eyes cold. His jacket was worn but carried the unmistakable patch Mira remembered in her nightmares. The snake coiled tight. "Morning," the man drawled. "Fine spot you got here." Ward said nothing. "You're keeping something that don't belong to you," the man continued. "Woman and her brats. We aim to collect." Ward's rifle stayed low, but Mira, watching from the sliver between the shutters, saw the tension in his shoulders coil tight as wire. "Go back," Ward said, voice like gravel. "You don't get a second warning." The men laughed. "Old man, you must think yourself awful hard." "I'm hard enough," Ward replied. "And stupid enough to die for them. You ready to do the same?" Silence rippled across the clearing. The lead rider's smirk faltered. Ward's rifle lifted, smooth as breath. And then the world broke open. Gunfire cracked, sharp and furious. Ward dropped the first man before his finger could even find his trigger. The rider toppled from his saddle like a sack of grain. The others scattered, but Ward was already moving. He ducked behind the woodpile, reloading with calm precision. 2 men charged toward the porch, firing wildly. Mira didn't hesitate. She snatched her rifle, cracked the door, and fired once. Just as Ward had taught her, 1 man fell screaming, clutching his leg. The other dove for cover. Inside, the children stayed silent, eyes wide, clutching hope tight between them. Ward finished the 3rd man near the barn, his shot clean and merciless. The 4th rider hesitated, watching his companions fall. He dropped his rifle, kicked his horse hard, and fled down the trail, disappearing in a cloud of dust and fear. Only 1 remained, the wounded man near the porch, dragging himself through the dirt, spitting curses. Ward approached, rifle lowered now. "You brought death to my door," Ward said, voice low and cold. The man snarled up at him. "She was ours." Ward's jaw flexed. "She was never yours." Before the man could spit another curse, Mira stepped past Ward. Her hands didn't shake as she raised the rifle. "For my husband, for my children, for every night I thought we wouldn't see morning." The man's eyes widened. Mira pulled the trigger. The clearing fell silent. Birds scattered into the rising sun. Ward turned slowly toward her, something like pride flickering beneath the stern set of his mouth. "Not bad," he muttered. Mira didn't smile. Not yet. Not until they buried the bodies beyond the tree line and washed the blood from the porch. Not until the children finally fell asleep, piled together in one bed, Hope cooing softly beside them. That night, Ward poured them both coffee, though neither drank much. They sat by the fire, the danger past, but the weight of what they'd done still heavy in the air. "Is it over?" Mira asked. Ward stared into the flames. "For now." She nodded, letting the silence linger before speaking again, her voice soft but sure. "Then I'm staying, and not just because I've got nowhere else to go." Ward met her eyes. Something warm flickered there, patient and sure. "Good," he said. And that was all. But for Mira LeClaire and Ward Callahan, that was more than enough. The days after the gunfire were slow and strangely tender. The land seemed to lean into silence, grateful for it. Birds returned first. Their song, once sharp and wary, grew sweeter with each sunrise. The creek hummed again, steady and low, winding its way through rocks as though the violence had never touched its banks. But inside the cabin, the echoes lingered. Ward rose earlier than usual, not for chores, for watching. He stood on the porch most mornings, coffee in hand, eyes sweeping the horizon. Not tense exactly, just aware. His fingers rested near the rifle propped beside the door, though each day he seemed a little slower to reach for it. Mira let him keep his vigil. She understood. The fear didn't leave just because danger rode off. Instead, she threw herself into the small things. Cleaning, cooking, sewing dresses for Teva out of worn sheets and leftover lace. Jesse sharpened tools. Sam carved tiny animals from scraps of wood. Hope grew fat and pink and loud, his cries no longer edged with hunger or cold, but with the simple, healthy frustration of a baby denied what he wanted right now. Mira nursed him in the mornings by the window, sunlight turning her hair golden, while Ward tended to chores. Often she'd catch him watching, not staring, not lingering, just watching. Something in his gaze had softened, not possession, not hunger, something steadier. Something that said, "You belong here now." Spring bloomed full by the time Ward set aside his rifle entirely. It was Teva who noticed first. "You forgot it," she said one evening, her small voice curious as she watched him come in from the field empty-handed. Ward glanced toward the door, where the rifle usually leaned. He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I did," he admitted. Mira met his eyes over the rim of her cup. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That night, they ate rabbit stew and fresh bread by the fire. Hope sat propped up on a blanket, giggling every time Sam made a silly face. Jesse recounted the story of their battle, making it grander with each telling. By the time he finished, it had been 10 riders, not 5, and Mira had leapt from the porch like a mountain lion, rifle blazing. They all laughed, even Mira. It was the kind of laughter that loosened ribs and peeled away months of tension. Ward didn't laugh loud, but he smiled, a real smile, the kind Mira hadn't seen from him yet, the kind that made her throat tighten unexpectedly. As spring leaned toward summer, the rhythm of their lives became easy in ways Mira hadn't believed possible. Ward and Jesse built a new chicken coop together. Sam and Teva raced each other to fetch water from the creek. Mira planted herbs by the window and mended clothes without urgency. Hope took his first steps in May, feet unsteady, but face bright with triumph. Ward caught him mid-fall, lifted him high, and for the first time said aloud what Mira had long suspected he felt. "Good boy," he murmured, pressing his forehead to Hope's. The word son hung unspoken in the air between them. Mira's chest ached at the sight, not from sadness, but from something fuller, something she hadn't dared want again. It happened quietly, like everything else between them. No confession, no grand gesture. Just a night in early June when the wind blew warm and the fire burned low. Mira sat beside Ward on the porch steps. They watched Teva chase fireflies, Sam show off his slingshot, and Jesse carve his name into a piece of driftwood. Hope slept inside, the sound of his soft breaths carrying through the open window. Mira leaned against Ward's shoulder without thinking, and he didn't pull away. Instead, his hand found hers. Fingers rough but sure. They sat like that for a long time, neither speaking. Finally, Mira whispered, "Are you afraid of what comes next?" Ward's thumb brushed over the back of her hand. "I was," he admitted, "but not anymore." Mira closed her eyes, letting herself feel the weight and warmth of him beside her. "I don't know how to be anything else, other than broken." Ward turned slightly, enough that she could feel his breath warm against her temple. "You're not broken, Mira," he said quietly. "You just stopped believing you could still build." She swallowed hard. "And now?" Ward squeezed her hand. "Now we build together." Mira laughed softly, the sound wet with unshed tears. "I don't know what this is," she confessed. Ward didn't hesitate. "It's family," he said. Just like that. Simple. True. Not built on blood or old vows. Built on survival, on laughter, on shared meals and midnight cries and fences fixed in the rain. Built on a woman who had run out of roads and a man who had run out of reasons, until they met in the middle. That night Ward kissed her. Software, slow, no hunger, no claiming, just the certainty of a man who knew where he belonged now. Mira kissed him back, hands cupping his jaw, heart thundering like spring thunder. And when they parted, neither said, "I love you." They didn't have to. The way Ward carried Hope the next morning, balanced on his hip, humming low as he made coffee. The way Mira reached out to straighten Ward's collar before he stepped outside, smile tugging at her lips. It said enough. Love wasn't loud here, it was quiet, like breathing, like hope. Summer came slow and lazy that year, as if even time had decided it was safe to linger. The hills bloomed wild with color, daisies, prairie roses, tall grass waving like shy dancers. The wind no longer carried whispers of fear. Instead, it hummed soft lullabies, curling gently through the open windows of the cabin. Inside, the rhythm of life settled like dust in sunlight. Hope learned to run, or at least how to fall with purpose. Every tumble brought laughter, every scrape a gentle kiss from Mira, every triumph a proud nod from Ward. Tava taught him words, patient and precise. She spoke softly, the way Ward taught her to when tracking deer. "Mama," she'd whisper. Hope would babble back. "Dada," she'd try next. And though Ward pretended not to care, Mira saw how his ears always tilted toward the sound. One evening, when Hope finally managed a garbled "da," Ward had to step outside for air. Mira found him standing under the porch beams, hands on his hips, staring at nothing. "You're crying," she teased gently. "Shut up," Ward muttered, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve. Mira only smiled, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. They didn't need words. Some things were too sacred for language. By mid-August, Ward had built a second bedroom onto the cabin, not because they needed it, not yet, but because Mira deserved space. He didn't ask for permission or expect thanks. He just hammered nails and sawed boards until something sturdy and safe stood where emptiness had once ruled. Tava helped paint it with pale blue milk paint, her strokes uneven but proud. Hope left handprints on the wall when Mira wasn't looking. Ward never wiped them away. On the first frost of autumn, Mira and Ward sat side by side on the porch, wrapped in shared blankets while the children slept soundly inside. The sky was clear, stars punched bright into the dark, endless above them. Mira sipped cider from a cracked mug. Ward drank his coffee, black as always. "Funny," Mira murmured, watching a shooting star scrape across the heavens. "A year ago, I thought I wouldn't see another winter." Ward said nothing, but his hand slid into hers beneath the blanket. "I didn't think anyone would stand for me," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Not after everything." Ward's thumb brushed slow circles on her palm. "I didn't stand for you," he said quietly. "You stood. I just stood beside you." Mira's eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She'd done enough of that. Instead, she turned and pressed a kiss to his cheek, slow and lingering. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered. Ward met her gaze, steady and sure. "I did," he said simply. "I just didn't know it yet." The first snow came early that winter, soft, silent, gentle. Tava and Hope, bundled tight in wool, made lopsided snowmen outside while Mira and Ward watched from the window, cheeks pressed together in quiet amusement. At night, they all crowded near the hearth. Hope crawled from lap to lap, babbling nonsense that made Tava giggle until she hiccuped. Ward carved small wooden animals, handing them one by one to Mira and the children, his fingers skilled and unhurried. Mira mended clothes by firelight, humming soft tunes that reminded Ward of lavender and spring rains. Some nights they spoke of what had been, of the storm that almost broke them, of the men who thought cruelty could own and cage, of the roads that had brought them here, bruised but unbowed. But mostly they spoke of tomorrow, of planting seasons, of teaching Hope to ride, of Tava's dream to someday see the ocean. They spoke like people who finally believed they had futures again. On the eve of the new year, Ward surprised Mira. No grand gesture, no kneeling in the snow. He simply handed her a small ring made from braided silver wire, forged quietly in the barn during long winter nights. Mira stared at it, lips trembling. "This ain't a proposal," Ward said, voice low and rough. "We've been married in every way that counts since you stayed that night." Mira laughed softly, tears welling. "Then what is it?" she asked. Ward smiled, rare and true. "A promise that I'll keep standing beside you, Every season, every storm, forever, if you'll have me. Mira slipped the ring onto her finger, her hands shaking just slightly. I already do, she whispered, and they sealed the vow with a kiss as snow fell quiet around them, wrapping their world in soft white promise. Life didn't become perfect. Some days were hard, some nights were long. Fear still lingered in quiet corners. But the cabin never fell silent again. Laughter echoed in the halls. Love lived in the small moments, a shared glance, a hand brushed against a back, the sound of children dreaming safe and sound. Hope grew tall. Tava grew brave. Mira and Ward grew old, together. And when visitors came through, they would see the carving above the door, faded now from sun and rain. It read simple, true, Kane Homestead, rooted in forever. And those who stayed long enough would see the truth in it. This wasn't just land. It was home, forged not from wood and stone, but from survival, from forgiveness, and from love that stayed. Love that always stayed. Love doesn't always arrive with a vow or a kiss. Sometimes it's found in the quiet moments, in a shared cup of coffee, in teaching a child to plant seeds, in standing your ground when running would be easier. Mira and Ward never asked for each other, but in the end, they chose each other, again and again, until choosing became forever. So tell me, have you ever loved or been loved not with words but with actions? The kind of love that stays, even when the storms pass? Leave your story below. I'm reading every single one. And if this tale stirred something in you, subscribe for more. Because out here in the wild, love writes its truest legends in silence.